Photography Daily.
I've never meant to be a photographer. What I really wanted to be was a naval architect, designing ships, or being an opera singer, but it didn't work that way.
If you're wondering about the title today, it's a quote attributed to Time Out when they featured the work of a photographer who, with a Kodak camera he came about from an American GI, grew up in late 50s and then 60s London, documenting life in the city from the viewpoint of a Jamaican family living and breathing the real story of the town.
I was living in the ghetto at that time, just documenting people. I used to do a lot of anti-apartheid. I used to do Ban the Bomb. That was another thing, CND.
It's a docu-interview today, really, covering his time spent making pictures in Europe too.
There was a big student uprising in Europe, and there was another uprising in Paris, so I thought I'd go to Paris.
And from France, he travels to Italy to join the original paparazzi.
A few Italian magazines started to buy my photographs. It was also the era where you had a lot of spaghetti westerns.
We talk about how the industry took to Charlie.
In Italy, they used to class me as the Black Cartier-Bresson. All right, I used to dress like him, which I still do.
But then this is a story where the trail goes cold, and we learn why Charlie Phillips puts his camera down upon returning to the UK.
The last straw was I was with Hendrix at Isle of Wight Festival, and I had some backstage photographs with him, joined by Tiny Tim and lots of other people, you know. And I took him around and says, "Did you really take that?" And I thought I must have found them in the thing, you know. So when nobody wanted them, I'd get demoralized and went on to wash dishes and work in a restaurant.
And one day his pictures are rediscovered.
And while I was in the shop, there was a customer there who saw some of these photographs, and he said, "What? You got these photographs from 1958 of our community, especially of Notting Hill."
We talk about the establishment, the institutions, to find out why he's disappointed.
And the institutions ought to open up and come to terms that people like us exist.
Stories of life told by photographers, and today that photographer is Charlie Phillips. Patron of the day today is Zeeshan Khan, and I'm linking to his website on the show page rather than his Instagram today, a site where he freely admits to being addicted to chasing light, shadows, architecture marvels, human expression, and whatever else that fancies his visual appetite. You'll find stories in colour and stories in black and white, and a lot of them too. We haven't really talked about post-processing on this show, preferring the why over the how, but it's very clear to me that Zeeshan has found his processing style. I'm invited into his cinematic feel, particularly within the Chinatown sets in your colour collections, Zeeshan. And it's the experimentation I like too, such as your dramatic titled set, which frankly feels like a well-executed visit to the Matrix. I recommend a coffee, 2, possibly 3 Garibaldis, and a little alone time just with his site. From the price of 1 high street coffee per month, patrons are so important to helping maintain a future for this cast. Without them, without you, if you remember, it couldn't be here in the form you find it as 3 complete full-length photography shows a week. To thank them, all patrons get to hear the extra Tuesday and Thursday photography diary shows on the easy-to-download Patreon app. And we talk about stuff like, well, dreams, which was yesterday's conversation. Plus, there's the benefit of broadcasting your website, projects or Instagram to thousands of photographers in our Patron of the Day mentions. We're also supported by MPB.com, who help you buy, sell and trade used camera gear in the US, the UK and Europe. And here's 2 reasons why you can trust them for your picture making. 1, peace of mind when you're buying in the form of a guarantee. And 2, money in your bank quickly when you sell. So if you want to buy, sell or trade used gear and be part of the ever-important circular economy, MPB.com is a great place to do business. So, to Charlie Phillips, a show today with a difference. A kind of docu-interview recorded on location at an allotment in London that he shares with his friend Agatha, the weekend just gone. Wiki is accurate in its representation of Charlie when it prints Phillips has been called arguably the most important yet least lauded black British photographer of his generation. And a January 2015 feature in Time Out London referred to him as the greatest London photographer you've never heard of, and some of his best works are only just being discovered. His works have shown at Tate Britain, the Museum of London, V&A, and in America within the museums of New York and Detroit. A former guest, Miss Anne Harriman, the first black male photographer to make pictures gracing the front cover of Vogue UK in its 104 years history, is a lifelong follower of Charlie. And I remember talking to him about this photographer who's been overlooked, it would seem, by some, not recognised and not believed at times, for the extraordinary pictures he made firsthand of a part of London, home to those who came over as part of the Windrush, those who emigrated from the Caribbean to the United Kingdom between the late 40s and early 70s. Charlie Phillips arrived himself with his family in 1956 from St Mary, Jamaica. And that's where we start our story. A lot of the time, Charlie, I start these conversations with a story about a father or other relative who gave you a camera, and a lifelong obsession leads to a career or fascination in photography. And in some ways, that's true of your story, Charlie. Although the camera came to your dad in a very different way, didn't it? Through the GIs.
Yeah, well, it was in the late 50s. Don't forget there was a Cold War going on, and you had a lot of GIs, American GIs. Now, the black ones used to end up in Brixton or Notting Hill when it was a ghetto. And one of them became friends with my dad because weekends they used to bring a lot of rhythm and blues records and booze and Pink Lady, wines like that, and American whiskey, you know. And we, they never had anywhere to go for entertainment because they weren't into going to the Hammersmith Pally or the Lyceum, you know. So we used to go to have parties, house parties, in our basement flats. This is Afro-American GIs, you know. What shocks a lot of people nowadays, for 50 years later, I've never meant to be a photographer. What I really wanted to be was a naval architect, designing ships, or being an opera singer, but it didn't work that way. And how life can change is this GI left the camera. No, didn't leave a camera. He got broken legless. He had to go back to his air base in a place called Briars Norton. I always remember that. And he pawned this camera out, a Kodak Renetta, for my dad for 15 shillings. He never turned up. He never came back to pick it up, because I guess on the American bases you couldn't get cheap cameras in those days. And along with it, he left a magazine called the Saturday Evening Post. And I was browsing through it, and there was a photograph, not an illustration. It's years later I found out who the illustrator was a guy called Norman Rockwell. That picture, that was the one thing that inspired me to probably fiddle around with a camera. And this illustration was called The Runaway. It was a policeman looking over this young kid who was running away from home. And I thought, well, as soon as I had the chance, I want to get out of this one room. Then I started fiddling around. So I was about 13, 14 at the time, and I used to do a paper round. And the one day I popped into, I think it's a Boots Chemist or Timothy something chemist, and bought Johnson's book for 3 and 6, Do-It-Yourself Photography, yeah? Then I went on to get a little Patterson photo contact printer that only does postcard, where you put the negative at the top and put a 60-watt light bulb over it, count for 10 seconds, right? And I started fiddling around. But when I used to go to bed, I used to go on the toilet and hang around. I used to try and sell my prints for 3p or 4p and all that. It's not till later on in life, when I saw other copies of Saturday Evening Post, found out about this guy called Norman Rockwell, who was documenting American life. At that time, we only meant to spend 5 years here, so I thought I'd started taking photographs, put them in an album. So 5 years later, we'd be back in Jamaica. We can talk about what life was like in England and have it in my photo album. That's how it started.
Charlie's original ambitions for his life were, as you heard, not one behind a lens documenting the story of London. No, he dreamed of working as a naval architect, designing ships with a strong leaning toward a life of song, specifically as an opera singer. And though that wasn't to be, he did in later life spend time as an extra in the movies and also on the musical stage. But he also remembers with a fondness his music teacher.
my music teacher thought I had a very good voice, and I was different from other kids. While other kids were into rock and roll, I was into classic music or jazz music. This music teacher thought I had a fantastic voice, because when I first came in, she was very suspicious. Yeah, she thought we didn't know anything. So one day in music lessons, she asked me, "What kind of songs do you used to sing in Jamaica, Charlie?" And I always remember, in those days, I had an alto voice, a very angelic voice, and I sang in a nice angelic voice. When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. So she said, "What other songs do you know?" I said, I can also sing Ave Maria in Latin because I was an altar boy. A lot of us came from a strict religious background. And I sang that for her in the Latin. She was dumbstruck. So every week she used to keep me behind and ask me to sing a song for her. Now, in that era, my dad used to listen to a lot of Jim Reeves records. And there was a film that came out called The Student Prince with Mario Lanza. And this is my first attraction to opera music. And I used to sing over him, because you're mine, etc. I'll walk with God from this day on, he was great. And I was so fascinated by the music, and I used to listen to the radio. I listened to my first real opera was Rigoletto by Verdi, and that's how I become a Verdi fan, and also Aida. See, I always remember this music teacher. She was a Dutch lady, and she just was so passionate, called me aside for me to sing her a song. So she wrote a letter to my dad. "I'm willing to give this guy free lessons. Yeah, he's got talent. Yeah. So Dad tore the letter up. I said, "No, I ain't coming here making up all of that, but you're an opera singer. Go and get yourself a job. But you want to be an opera singer, yeah?" So, okay, leaving school now, we used to have a youth employment officer who was fixing you up for a job. And he says, "Charlie, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a naval architect or an opera singer." And he looks at me like, "Fucking mad, aren't you? Why don't you get a job with London Transport or the post office or the hospital service?" Yeah, that would be a long-term career, job security, So it never worked out like that. This is when I became very rebellious.
Charlie's photography was documenting by now some of the protests he witnessed. Anti-war emotions ran high with unrest about Vietnam. There were the trade unions, anti-apartheid. They were all photographed from the viewpoint of someone personally interested in the movements he pictured, not simply as a lensman for hire, although he was starting to get paid for some of his work.
The first photograph I saw was of Michael X, when Dick Gregory came to England, so it was the first photograph. He told me to take it down to United Press.
Described by the historian Simon Sharma as a visual poet, chronicler, champion, one of Britain's great photo portraitists, Charlie's work is significant, not just to the history of Black Britain, but to British social history.
I never thought 60 years later, what I've done is document our part of London history, because how absurd it is. When one of the museums first saw them, they said, "My gosh, we didn't know people was documented." It's because most of the documents were they had photographers who were assigned to take certain photos. I was living in the ghetto at that time, just documenting people. I used to do a lot of anti-apartheid. I used to do Ban the Bomb. That was another thing, CND, and just to document things, And don't forget, I used to live in Notting Hill, and everybody in the 60s, the swinging 60s, everyone used to pass by, And when Hendrix first came here, I met him at the Marquee Club his first night. Alan Price, Chaz Chandler, they all used to come down to this black club called the Q Club as well.
Aged now 24, Charlie Phillips, the British social history chronicler, turns his attentions to Europe, and initially France.
In about 1968, there was a big student uprising in Europe, and there was another uprising in Paris. So I thought I'd go to Paris for a day or two to take some photographs of the student uprising in Paris, Action Directe, that's what they used to call Action Directe. I went over to Paris, hanging around with students and living in communes. What happened, I always remember outside the Gare du Nord, I saw the police kick out of the student and like blood was everywhere, and I just panicked and I just hopped and left, not even packed my bags properly, but I just thought I'd get out of Paris. Anyway, I was traveling with a rucksack and I hitchhiked out of Paris and spent a few weeks down in Marseille, Jean Lapin. You know, I didn't take much photograph, but I ended up in hitchhike. I didn't even know where I was going, so I ended up in Rome. Yeah,
as you do.
June La Dolce Vita,
Yeah.
you know. So I was staying in a youth hostel.
But this is where you started to hang out with the paparazzi.
This is 1968. They were just finished making the film Cleopatra. And I was outside Piazza di Spagna one morning and I saw all these people running off. I think it was Elizabeth Taylor or Marcello Mastroianni. So I didn't know what was happening. I didn't even know what a paparazzi was. So I joined in and started taking photographs.
Just with the camera that you had with you. That wasn't the same one as you'd had all those years, though, wasn't it?
Was I went up market and got a Petri for £35. Because I used to take a lot of photographs of parties and, you know, and they'd give me 5 shillings. I don't know, I just ended up, didn't have enough money to come back to England. I didn't have no one to turn, so I ended up in Rome in a commune. People took sympathy on me. Part of the student uprising as well, were hanged around it. But in the same time, to sort of survive, I used to hang around Piazza di Spagna, Via Condotti, and there used to be a famous cafe called Cafe El Greco, and you just hang around there. You'd see some celebrity passing by. So in those days, you'd see people like Peter O'Toole and John Philip Law, Rod Steiger, just to be in this area, to be seen. Because it's us paparazzi who's built the career of lots of actors and actresses. You know, but now we get abused. It's not the same. Years ago, they used to love you, taking up on they tell you, go away, you can't.
Sei per me la più bella del mondo.
Italy was an exciting place to film in and be seen in, and Charlie certainly seemed to have a natural draw. Directors, actors, they recognised and knew him and would often invite him to take coffee in the street cafes.
A few Italian magazines started to buy my photographs. It was also the era where you had a lot of spaghetti westerns. So I used to take photographs of all these extras who wants to, you know, because I have to have a photograph to take to the director. Yeah,
because people think of spaghetti westerns as being made in America, but they were made in Spain and Italy, weren't they?
The studios, and the studios was done in Cinecittà or De Paulis. The outdoor scene was done in Almeria in Spain. Yeah, so I used to take photographs for some of the extras who wanted a part, you know, to look like a Mexican or an Indian or a cowboy or for crowds. And more or less that's how I survived. But in the meantime, if there was anything happening in Piazza di Spagna, everybody used to pass by Piazza di Spagna. Some of the people I took photographs of, I didn't even know who they were. I used to sell things to Il Messaggero because Brett Eklund and there was a fire on the film set of a film called The Untouchables, Peter Falk and John Cassavetes. So I was there with a camera and took photos, and I was front cover of the Il Messaggero. And Il Messaggero was a Catholic newspaper, and they used to print a few of my photographs. Yeah.
During this time, were you coming back to the UK as well? Because you were still growing the pictures that you had of British culture.
I was coming back on and off because I had money then, because then in those days you could get a charter flight for 25 quid. You know, seriously, yeah. The Pilgrimage, yeah. I always remember. Or you get a student. In those days, I was always a student, you know, because I used to have a student pass for some unknown reason. So I used to come back and forwards and take photographs of my community. And funny enough, in 1971, I had an exhibition in Italy at Photo Studio.
This was your first solo, wasn't it?
Il Diaframma in Italy, and they published me in Fotografica Italia and one thing and the other, you know. Then I had another one in Switzerland on Italian workers abroad in Switzerland, you know.
Stern, Harper's Bazaar, Life, Italian Vogue, exhibitions, and then Charlie returned back to Notting Hill.
Biggest mistake, coming back to England.
Why was that the biggest mistake? I mean, you were doing really well here. You were published in magazines, then you returned.
Well, when I came back, I showed my work around, and people used to say, "Did you really take that?" And they used to fob me off, and I couldn't get one assignment. So then I used to end up squatting, and you get demoralized.
So essentially, nobody here was buying your work. They didn't believe you'd made the pictures.
They didn't even look at it.
No?
And the last straw was I was with Hendrix at Isle of Wight Festival, and I had some backstage photographs with him, joined by Tiny Tim and lots of other people, And I took him around and says, "Did you really take that?" And they thought I must have found them in the thing, So when nobody wanted them, I get demoralized and went on to wash dishes and work in a restaurant.
I want to fill that gap in then between then and 1988, because you opened a diner, but in those years between, what was happening to Charlie Phillips?
Nothing was happening. My negatives and everything was under my bed. They were in my attic, and I was moving from squat to squat, and I lost a lot of it. So and then what happens then? I used to wash dishes. Then I went on to work as a part-time chef. And I went on to work and do a bit of chefing here and there as well. When I finally opened my diner, it wasn't even a restaurant. It was a diner, because before that I used to do a few festivals. I used to go to a lot of festivals, and over the years you establish yourself. And I went on to open the diner. This was in 1988. Sometimes I'd still get phone calls if people wanted, or magazines wanted, black images, and I had a phone call one day that they wanted some images of the Blue Beat era. So I dug some photographs out, and the courier came and picked it up, and 3 weeks later he brought it back. And while I was in the shop, there was a customer there who saw some of these photographs, and he said, "What? You got these photographs from 1958 of our community, especially of Notting Hill?" And he was a counsellor. He was in the shop, and he got a grant from the Art Council to have this book published, Notting Hill Gate, in the 60s,
The extended archive stretched decades and included Notting Hill weddings, the trial of the Mangrove Nine from outside the courts, How Great Thou Art, pictures of African and Caribbean funerals, the carnival, the housing shortage, Sunday best portraits, protests and civil rights, individual stories of life, Michael Manley passing through London, the building of the Westway, community meetings, life. So, an archive rediscovered is good news, right?
After the book was published, everything went dead. And they started Black History Month, and they wanted something of colour to put on. The Museum of London got in touch with me, took what was left over from my archive, and sorted it out, and they decided to put an exhibition on for me for Black History Month. And they were so surprised that so many people from the diverse community has visited a museum, because the institution didn't know that people like us exist, like people like us has got culture, and our presence. Our presence is not well represented in some of the, even though we're part of British culture, our side of the culture hasn't been given a proper platform.
Because you don't like it being called black culture, you like it's British culture.
It's British culture. That's what. This is why I have debates all the time, and the institutions ought to open up and come to terms that people like us exist. So I swear I'll never knock on another door anymore. After 1974, I've never knocked on another door. I've never showed my work to anybody. I let people who knows about me come to me.
And Charlie Phillips is now on a quest, it seems, to counter what he refers to as the institutions. The aforementioned How Great Thou Art exhibition, from which there's also a book, was a far more democratically organised event for the people, by the people.
My last exhibition, How Great Thou Art, I never had a photo editor. I never had an art critic. You know what I done? I called ordinary people off the street. I called some students, and I said, select a photograph that you think would do well in an exhibition. And that's how great they were. And they were selected by ordinary people. And some of these people has never been into a museum. Yeah, and one of the things I hate about some of the cultural institution here, it is not for working class people. They've been priced out. Something I feel, and as a sort of taxpayer, we're not properly well represented. It's become very elitist. This is why I rate Banksy, because where was all the art critics in his days when he used to give free, put his pictures all over the place? Where was all the art critics? And some people are so dumb, they painted over it, they done it. But he gave a lot of pleasure to people who will never afford to go in one of these public institutions to pay. Yeah, and this is what I'm against.
But now you've got, I can almost say, an army of volunteers that spend their time with you.
This is what surprised me, believe you. And they're the only one. Some of them thinks I've got an interesting story. They call me Uncle Charlie. They like me to tell the story. And this is the only thing. I'm so surprised. This is the only, both black and white as well. Volunteers, because I can't do the computer. I can't do email. So they volunteer to make email.
So they're keeping your archive and building it.
Building it up and preserving it. And they haven't heard stories from the diverse, I don't know how to put it, from the diverse community or a person of colour could have such archive behind them, you know?
Are you still photographing?
I do take photographs of my friends and all that, but I'm from the old school. So, in fact, one of my volunteers is giving me as a present an Hasselblad 500cc, which I couldn't even afford to buy, which is very touching. And another student has given me a Leica. I had to pawn my Leica out, and I didn't have enough money to pick it up. So another one of my followers is chipping in, getting me a Leica.
But you do go to the coast and you photograph, and you like horses?
No, well, I like horses and I like ships, but I don't go, I belong to 2 shipping societies, and I used to go out and photograph ships. And I do have a passion for horses, but I ended up sticking in the concrete jungle. And this COVID thing has done me good, because it gives me a chance to rediscover who I should have been. Yeah, I'm a country boy deep down, and this is where I try to find my roots again, rediscover my roots.
How do you feel? There are photographers, I'm going to mention one in particular, Miss Anne Harriman, who is the first black photographer to grace the front pages of the British Vogue. Because you had an Italian Vogue cover, but for them, you are a very inspirational character, for Miss Anne in particular.
We were on the one show together, and he said, when he finally met me, he said he's been following my work since he was 14, you know. But I think I hold my community a legacy, because I've documented over the years, and we're coming up to the 7th generation.
Do you ever think of yourself, as other people look at you, as a legend of photography?
Nah, not yet, Doug. I'm just there as a documenter. I'm telling our side of the story that's been left out of history. Our side of the story, my side of the story that's been left out of history.
So you don't understand the fuss that's made sometimes?
I haven't come to terms with it. Is there a fuss being made?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't think so. There's a fuss being made. No, I don't think so.
Actually, also some of the photographers like Cartier-Bresson, to him, you were an idol.
He came to my exhibition. No, and Elliot Youth. Yeah, when I came back, I told people I knew all these guys, and nobody believed me. And I wish if I had the photograph with Cartier-Bresson, because the only thing in Italy, the only thing they identified me, they used to class me as the black Cartier-Bresson. All right, I used to dress like him, which I still do, because of my bohemian lifestyle, you know. But he came to my exhibition, at Il Diaframma in Milano many years ago.
You know, there's something very special about photography. You know that. It's often referred to, and you're going to hear this especially in a forthcoming episode over the next few weeks, as the great enabler. Our dear friend, the late Steve Shipman, called it just that. And it is, when you look back at Charlie's archive, what he's done, what he's seen, where he's been. And I'll link, of course, in today's show notes. But equally, this podcast for me has been that too. This has been the first time in a year I've been able to get out and actually interview somebody in person. And whilst I accept many of my interviews will continue to be conducted across the internet, this one offered a chance to meet with someone so important, so enduringly precious to British photographic culture, that I couldn't let that opportunity pass. Podcasts, too, it seems, are the great enabler. And I hope you feel you've been part of this adventure too. I really do. Ronald Charlie Phillips, or Smokey Joe, his nickname, or Uncle Charlie, as his volunteers know him affectionately, is, as he would want to be thought of, a man of the people for the people. There's no pomp, nor ceremony, nor bloated self-importance when you meet him, or talk to him on the phone, actually. In fact, the first thing he did when I met him was thrust a digging spade in my hand. We were headed to his allotment after all, and I can't help but feel that there are many who could learn from this quiet powerhouse of photography. I can't think of many, or perhaps any other photographer, who might suggest the perfect place to sit for an interview was at his allotment on an overcast Saturday afternoon, with 2 carrier bagfuls of prints, a file of clippings, on a bench sat next to the compost.
What are you digging here? What are you planting? Do you? I mean, Agatha is doing a lot of work at the moment.
No, I have in my other garden at home. I used to I have a passion for tomatoes. Yeah, I grow about 10 different varieties of tomatoes, and then I grow a Caribbean type of spinach called callaloo. Yeah. And then I have a passion for the Welsh red potatoes, unusual vegetables, or yellow courgettes, you know.
I've never heard of some of these.
Well, the weird things, you know, but still.
Are they here? Will you plant them here?
I plant some of them here, but I plant some of them in my other garden, but we had a bad crop last year.
Oh, no.
Especially my apple trees and my tomatoes, yeah.
How often do you come here?
Every weekend, or every other weekend sometimes, but depends if I haven't got a talk. During the summertime, they have more social events to attend to, because the only thing about this cultural life, I got invited to so many launch parties that I gate crash sometimes, or always find somebody to always find someone that something's happening. I always go on someone's guest list to go to some of these do to drink some of the cheap plunk they put on, you know, it's a cheap way of entertaining. Oh my gosh, I'm tired of quiche Lorraine. Some of the plunk they put on, man. I'm tired of quiche or Chinese spring roll. I'd tell almonds.
What would you lay on?
No, but I think they should lay on a bit of everything for the diverse community as well, you know? Some jerk chicken, spice it up a bit.
Yeah, jerk chicken would be lovely. I'd turn up for that.
No. Seriously. No, and the best ones, you know, you have to really know a friend who can sneak you in. You know, this is how I pass my time, because I have to keep an eye to see, as an ex-taxpayer, to see how my money is going amongst the cultural elites. Yeah, no, seriously, it's another world out there, you know.
My thanks again to Charlie Phillips. My thanks also sincerely to our patrons today for supporting this show. This is the kind of outing I would like to do more often for you, and your kind support makes and will make it possible for the future. If you'd like to donate and be a part of our community where we talk on Zoom, share our stories and diary pieces in the More feed, then click the Patreon link on the website. And that's it for today. Keep sending your questions, your feedback and photo stories to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition, which is the Friday Photo Walk. On that note, remember you can also send in pictures from your own photo walks to appear on the episode's show page online, with links to your website or Instagram or Flickr or whatever. Music on the show today was from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you Friday.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.